Thank you, Chair. We are now live.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this virtual Cabinet meeting that is being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating via audio, video and online. There is also the opportunity for the public and press to listen and view proceedings, and if you're doing so, you're very welcome. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members and officers are in attendance.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call everybody's name first. If you can just answer to confirm that you can hear and be heard. Councillor Albert?
Yes.
Councillor Billing?
Yep.
Councillor Clark?
Here.
Councillor Dennis Harburg?
Here.
Councillor Hoskins?
Yeah, here.
Councillor Jarvis?
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Steers Hanscom?
Yes, I'm here.
Deputies, Councillor Ruth Brown?
Present.
Councillor Ian Mantle?
Yeah.
Councillor Carol Stanier? Councillor Stanier?
Yes.
I don't think that was Councillor Stanier answering.
Just turned up.
Okay, I will come back to her. We also have the Chair of Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, Councillor Aspinwall.
I'm here.
Thank you. We have visiting Councillor Claire Strong. Hello, Claire. Okay, and we have a member of the public who's going to address you later, Bernard Eddleston.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much indeed. Officers, we have Anthony Roche.
Yeah, here.
Ian Falstone.
Yep, here.
Ian Cooper.
Yeah, here.
Jeanette Thompson.
Present. Good evening.
Joe Duffy.
We didn't hear you there, Joe, although we could see you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Steve Crowley.
Yes, present.
Vaughan Watson.
Here.
Louise Randall.
Yep, I'm here.
Chloe Gray.
Present.
Peter Lapham.
Yes, I'm here.
Vic Godfrey.
Yes, present.
We have William Edwards on IT and myself, Hilary Deneen. Is there anyone that I've missed? No, good. As far as the proceedings go, extracts from the remote and partly remote meetings protocol are included with the agenda, and the full version is available on the Council's website, which includes information regarding live streaming, noise interference, rules of debate, voting and Part 2 items. Members are requested to ensure that they are familiar with the protocol. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? No, in that case, I will hand over to the Chair, Councillor Martin Steers Hanscom. Thank you.
Oh, I'm not muted. Right, okay. I'm juggling here. So item 2 is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Gary Grindle and Deputy Executive Members Helen Oliver and Sean Prendergast. Are there any other apologies? If not, we have item 2A, minutes of meetings from the 27th January to 22nd of October. And since the beginning of March, when we started to hold meetings remotely, we've been unable to approve minutes of meetings. We are now able to approve these with the electronic signature of the chair being applied following approval. There are 5 sets of minutes to agree. I'll go through them in turn, but we won't be taking separate votes, you'll be pleased to know. 28th of January, there is a small amendment required in that Howard Crompton was present at the meeting, though hasn't been recorded as present. 23rd of June 2020, 21st of July 2020, 15th September 2020, and in this case, the titles of Howard Crompton and Joe Duffy are incorrect. At this meeting, Howard was Service Director Customers and Joe was Customer Services Manager. and finally the 22nd of October 2020. I shall propose from the chair that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meetings of Cabinet held on those dates with the amendments I've mentioned. Can I have a seconder?
Happy to second them, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or any concerns for accuracy? I see no hands. So in that case, moving on, we need to take a vote. So would you vote in the normal way, please?
Keith Hoskins, sorry, Councillor Hoskins has a hand up. Is that to abstain or is that to speak, Councillor? Oh, you've removed it now.
You're on mute.
I was anticipating the vote.
Okay.
Right.
In that case, please vote now. Thank you.
That is clearly carried. I'll return to my notes. And then I have to say now that I authorise the committee member and scrutiny manager to apply my electronic signature and initials to the approved minutes. Item 3 is notification of other business. We have none. Item 4 are my announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on mod.gov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded that this council has declared a climate emergency. This is a serious decision and means that, as this is an emergency, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. I would draw your attention, including those who are watching this meeting on YouTube, to some of the things we are doing to combat climate change, which are included on the published version of the agenda on the front sheet. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under my announcements on the published agenda. In the order published, up to and including item 12. We will then consider the part 2 items, following which we will return to part 1 to take items 13, 14 and 15. Okay, if there are no questions, move on to public participation. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Bernard Eddleston, who is going to speak on behalf of the Charnwood House trustees. So Bernard, you are very welcome. And yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to make a short presentation to the Committee on Charnwood, which is item 15 on your agenda. I'm chairman of the Charnwood Community Management Association, and we are the community group that's mentioned in the report before you tonight. We've worked with the officers over the past year to make a major input to the report. And I'd just like to clarify certain aspects and confirm our determination to return Charnwood to public use as a community hub for the benefit of Hitchin residents. We have to say at the outset, however, that we are surprised that part of the discussion will be held in part 2. This seems to go against your desire to be, as an administration, for more openness and involvement of the public. And whilst we are an interested party and have contributed significant financial details to the council, we are unable to comment on the accuracy or otherwise of any financial details which may be presented in part 2. These are likely to influence your decision this evening. Moving on, the gift of Charnwood was made by the Moss family to Hitchin Urban District Council in 1937. The report quotes the preamble to the conveyance, and I quote, "The grantors have offered the said property as a gift to the Urban Council to be held in perpetuity as a public library and museum for the benefit of the inhabitants of the said Urban Council." But the actual conveyance states in addition, not in the report, the building may be used for other public purposes as the council may hereafter from time to time determine. Therefore, the building cannot be sold or leased for private use as offices or flats. CCMA, we registered the building as an asset of community value. The CCMA was established as a charitable incorporated organisation several years ago. When it appeared Charnwood would soon become vacant upon completion of the new museum and town hall project. This didn't happen due to the issues surrounding the project. However, with the eventual opening of the new museum, we have over the past year been able to move matters forward. And some time ago, we were successful in obtaining a small grant from the social investment business to carry out a feasibility study. With the cooperation of the administration and officers, we have undertaken a survey of the building, engaged an architect to draw up plans for internal modifications which will be necessary, have a surveyor draw up a detailed cost plan, and produced an initial business plan. These have been submitted to the officers and to the executive member for enterprise and cooperative development, in confidence for the sole purpose of evaluating our proposal. The cost plan indicates that there will be a significant expenditure required by the council to return the building to a good state of repair after many years of neglect. However, this should not come as a surprise to Cabinet members. The report before you also states that the final removal of museum items from Charnwood may not happen for a couple of years. Having been round the building, the amount of museum items remaining there is minimal and could be moved in a few weeks. We are sure the museum service can find storage for such a small number of items if so directed. The building is unheated and not suitable for continued long-term storage of artifacts. This means that the building could be declared surplus to requirements in a matter of months so that the renovation could start. Our business plan shows that the building can be run successfully for use by community groups on a full repairing basis, thus relieving the council of future expenditure once the building is repaired and modified. Clearly, should the council give agreement in principle to the transfer of Charnwood to a community group this evening, we would need to refine the plan and work with the council to obtain grants to carry out the necessary internal modifications. However, we have already demonstrated that we have the expertise to make successful grant applications. And whilst our current trustee body has a wide range of expertise, we would seek to expand it and also engage a publicity campaign with local residents and community groups. We hope, therefore, that the council will make a decision this evening to proceed in principle with the lease of Charnwood to a community group, and we look forward to working cooperatively with the council to make this a reality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Bernard. There are opportunity for questions now, and the first one will come from Judy Billing. Judy.
Strangely, Chair, my question is to us rather than to Bernard, because, of course, I take very seriously his slight disappointment and second of cynicism about our intention as a council to be as open as we possibly can be, and I share that aspiration. And so rather than just leaving that comment hanging in the air, which is was a sad comment, I wonder whether somebody on our side would helpfully explain why it is absolutely necessary that we do have a small amount of material in part 2.
Thank you, Judy. I think it would be helpful to get an answer to that one straight away. We did have a discussion about it in private, but in public, I think we ought to say the reason as well. So I don't know if either Jeanette or Anthony would like to respond to that.
Well, perhaps Peter wants to explain in very brief detail, because they've obviously had the discussions and he's had the advice from Isabel on the matter, obviously being mindful that he says it's commercially sensitive. Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, that we've had legal advice that although there have been open discussions between the Charnwood Group and the council, they are commercially confidential, and therefore that is the reason we've been advised by our legal department under local government rules that part of the discussion has to be in part 2. I think that really covers it. I don't think it's any
great secret. That's what we've been advised, and clearly we have to take the advice. So thanks for asking the question, Judy. Did you want to come?
I wasn't trying to make it a bigger thing than it was. I just didn't want to leave that hanging in the air.
No, thank you. Thank you. I was thinking of the words and you've helped me to find the words. So thank you very much. Okay, so Councillor Elbert, Ian.
So thanks, Chair, and thanks, Bernard, for the presentation. A couple of questions really, and obviously we also had a discussion about this at the Hitching Committee briefly the other night. I think the first thing is, I don't know whether you could say a little more about how you would envisage the a revived Charnwood operating in terms of what sort of community groups you think might use it, what influence the council would have in the way that it might be used. And then I think probably secondly is how confident are you that you would be able to raise? Clearly the council, as you mentioned, will need to make a significant investment if we were to proceed. But how confident would you be in terms of at your end in raising the relevant grant money that's there? And thirdly, lots of us do have some concerns around what did or didn't happen over the town hall and museum. In many respects, that the town hall and museum being run in council hands rather than being effectively rented out to an external organisation was probably the right answer. Be interested just to get your views, Bernard, as to why you think that the way of your group running it is the right answer for this particular building. Be grateful for any views on those three areas. Thank you.
I think the first area, we'd envisaged a range of potential groups that we know of, including ones with an educational bias, things like U3A, the educational trust as well. There's also the areas where we know local social investment companies are short of space, like the Language Centre in Hitchin, which uses other areas which aren't necessarily very satisfactory at the minute, plus a number of community groups. We also think that in addition to that, we could supplement the income during weekends, for example, by potentially having it as a venue for small weddings and that sort of thing, which would supplement the income, or if not being used by community groups. But I think we'd obviously we haven't actively gone out in many ways to some of these groups because of the uncertainty over the timescales and everything else. And clearly there's no good getting commitment from people now if we can't say when it's going to be open and be available for use. On your second point about I think that was about the grants, obtaining grants. Well, I've been involved with a number of charities over years in raising funds, so I have a certain amount of experience. I think it will be quite challenging, but nevertheless, a key point will be if it's being seen that the council is putting money into the project, then it's a lot easier for an organisation like ours to raise matching type of funds. If it was purely just us raising it, I think we'd have less success. I think with showing the commitment from the council to put some money in, we'll have a lot better success. But of course, a lot of funds have been diverted towards cover the pandemic at the minute, and we'd have to see how that starts to change over the next few months, I think. But I think there are a number of funding streams out there, and as I say, I have got experience, and some of the other trustees have in raising such grants. What was the third point you had?
I think the thing was as to whether whether the facility being run
Oh, right.
by external
Yeah.
organisations the right answer, as opposed to being run, by the council or whatever. In terms of the long running discussions we had about the museum.
Yeah, well, I hope that I wouldn't want to get involved with those sort of things. But I think in general, if it can be run on a ongoing basis where we're fully maintaining it, then I think it's best that it is run by the community. I mean, it's a bit like community centres. I mean, why don't you run all those yourselves? I don't think that's necessary in the best interests of the council. It may be that for the town hall that was a different matter, but I think for something of the size of Charnwood House and the size of that community centre, I think it's right that the local people should be running it.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Bernard, for your presentation and also answering those questions very fully. So that's really appreciated. As you know, we will be taking the item later in the agenda. There will be a small gap while we go, and there's several items we need to deal with in part two, in other words, in private, before we come to that item. But you're very well. Obviously, I won't be inviting you to speak again, but you're very welcome to stay in the meeting.
But
while we do that.
Presumably it will be quite some time later, yes?
Yes, you may wish to watch on YouTube instead. That
Yeah.
might be more convenient to you. But
Okay.
but thank you very much for your contribution.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, we move on then to item 5, which is strategic planning matters. And Councillor Clark, Paul, you're going to introduce the item.
Oh, you're still muted.
Teach me to swap screens so much. Right, as I was saying to myself, you have a report in front of you that covers a wide range of things. The local plan, I think our local plan is one of the ones that takes precedent, and I was just checking to see if Nigel Smith or Ian were on the call.
I'm here.
I realise I've departed from my notes, and I should have taken item 5 before item 6 before, which is item 7.
I was going to say, you got to be a bit quick.
Yeah, so my apologies. So I'm not sure we have do we have Nigel with us yet? But in any case, let me go back to where I should be, which is to take item 6A. We have several referrals from the Fire Committee. Some of them will be taken with later items, but we will be taking item 6A first on its own. So my apologies, Kate. Councillor Aspin will ask you to introduce item 6A.
Thanks ever so much, Chair. And I'm also a little bit confused, so just bear with me, and I hope I'm doing that one. I realise there were a few. So the Finance Audit and Risk Committee met on the 3rd of December. And I do want to put on record just how disappointing the attendance was at that meeting. We were barely quorate, well, we were just quorate, with only 3 members there to have debate. So I'd like to mention that here at Cabinet. I think it's incumbent upon everybody to make sure that is addressed. And just for the record, there were no apologies received either prior to the meeting, so we weren't to know. That being said, the 3 members that were there were capable of some good discussion, although not as robust as it would have been had we been fully present. So the item that I believe I am referring to Cabinet now is the risk management. Can you just...
That's correct, yeah.
I don't want to make a mistake on that. Okay, just bear with me while I get the right one up on my screen. So what the committee would like to refer to Cabinet at this stage is an increase in risk score. So we've got the risk score there from 8 to 9, you'll see on the COVID-19 leisure management contract. And I think we've discussed that in many guises in many different meetings. I'd be surprised if anybody on the cabinet wasn't aware of why we are recommending that, but happy to talk on it if you want me to. And we also recommend that the amendments to the framework as part of the management response be noted and approved. And we've set out some reasons there. So there's very little else I could say on that, because I think you probably do. I would like to say that at the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, we were ably abetted and assisted by a pair of Ians. Thank you, Councillor Albert, and also to Ian Cooper for helping us through that meeting and to give us the information that we needed. But yeah, that's what those recommendations to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aspinwall. I think it's a very clear report, and as you say, I think we all know the reasons. I will propose from the chair that the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Ian Albert, thank you, Councillor Albert, to second. Is there any discussion? If not, can I then put it to the vote? The recommendations, two recommendations: that the risk score for COVID-19 leisure management contract risk be increased from 8 to 9, and that the amendments to the risk management framework as part of the management response to the SIAS audit be noted and approved. So could you vote in the normal way, please? Thank you very much. That is clearly carried.
Funny that that's become the normal way, isn't it, Chair?
It is, yes. And some of us are when we get a new computer, we're finding different ways of switching from one screen to another to vote. So my apologies if I'm a bit slow tonight. So then I think I can go back up to where as I said, the other items referred from Finance, Audit and Risk will be taken with item 11, item 10 and item 12 respectively. And we move on to strategic planning matters. But before I do that, I would like to place on record the thanks to Finance, Audit and Risk. I agree with the point that we need to make sure it's well attended in future, but the in-depth discussions that committee has are much appreciated by Cabinet. So over to you, Councillor Clark, to introduce item 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am prepared this time rather than bouncing me through it last time. So you have item 7 before you. The main point of interest is the local plan. Nigel Smith is not with us tonight, but Mr. Falstone is. I nearly was rude to him and called him a councillor, but that's beside the point. Nigel has done sterling work over the past 3-4 weeks, and his team, not only in preparing the work, but then having to sit through the examination in public, which he did very ably and supported the council's position. 2 things of note that I am aware of, and Mr. Falstone may wish to add before we move on, to treat this as a separate thing. One is that due to a reply from the County Council on Education, where they couldn't give us a direct answer about Barkway, the council wishes to withdraw BK3, which is a site in Barkway. The inspector has agreed to look at this and has put an extra day's hearing in at the beginning of February, I believe. Dates are still being sorted. The other area was something we requested, was due to some new staffing and some experience we have gained as a council, the master planning process, which will enable us to do a lot more on environmental standards and climate change. We were asking to look at that to reinforce what we've already put in the plan and make it stronger, which was discussed this morning at the project board and recommended to progress, because we had to get the answer in quite quickly. So there's that. And I know Councillor Jarvis has asked whether we would consider, when we look at that, the carbon offsetting, so he can understand it, because it is cross-party working cross-council working, all departments, and not just burying your heads in a silo. Apart from that, there was a lot of discussion, and I mean a lot of discussion about numbers, both to the east of Luton and the numbers in general, which went on and on. We are reliant on the inspector. He did make the point on many occasions that the plan is in his control, and we await his feedback. The extra days should not slow the process. That there was a concern by some members. We are assured, but then, you know, we're assured of many things, and you know, whether things come to fruition or not, we're not sure. But we will try and hold his feet to the fire as much as we can, so that we can get on to where we need to be. Ian, have I missed anything else out, or do you want to add things?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I think the only update I can give is at the wash-up session on the final afternoon, which can be viewed on the YouTube, is that the inspector has undertaken to provide us a letter if he has any concerns by the end of January, but we will be notified via the programme officer in advance of that. So, as you say, Councillor Clark, with the additional days which are still to be fixed in the diary, we hope early February, he will be working on some of the key issues and letting us know if he has concerns before the end of next month. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing I should add, I've had the planning white paper that came out. There is actually a good bit of news in it, in that it supports our moves on the master planning process. Apart from all the bad bits it does, but it does give some strength to that. And just for people's awareness, I believe East Hart is being quoted as having a lot stronger environmental policies within their local plan that has been approved, so gives confidence to our master planning approach. Is there any questions on this bit? I can see Councillor Jarvis.
Yes, Councillor Jarvis.
Well, I mean, it's not so much a question as an observation, but you know, clearly if we were starting on the local plan now, we would be perhaps taking some different views on some of the sustainability issues. Clearly our scope to do that is rather limited, but I'm keen that we should take whatever opportunities are presented by the master planning process. You know, we are casting around to save relatively small bits of carbon. Building thousands of houses is going to represent several very large bits of carbon. So getting this right is pretty significant in terms of meeting the Council's climate change objectives. And anything we can do to achieve that at this stage of the plan, in my view, we should do to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah, Paul, do you want to come back on that, and then I'll
and I'll finish off the other bits I've got. Wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, the 25,000 houses on the south of Cambridgeshire that was put forward by a developer during the week by Thatchams, who actually advertised that they do zero carbon houses. However, there is a number of offsetting targets in that when they get to the factory, when it goes back to the factory and they pre-build the bits and pieces. But that's there.
Before you go on, Paul, just to say that in the project board meeting we had on master planning, it was clear while we've agreed certain modifications on to go to into the plan, how we actually do the master planning and how we take it forward is very much a continuing discussion. And clearly we will want all members to be involved in that to make sure that we do what you suggest, Steve, in terms of the effect it has on carbon.
Yeah, we're talking about the higher achieving, you know, overarching desires. The devil's in the detail on how we manage it. The way, you know, it's been described up until now, we've had a light touch planning approach whereby is it bad enough, you know, to refuse, rather than it's good enough, you know, to approve. And it's trying to move that around, and that will face us challenges as an organisation on moving to that forward. So, but I think it's personally, I think it's worth it to move things. Ian, is that a legacy hand, or have I said something I shouldn't have done?
No, it was just to build on what you said, Councillor Clark, is that members may remember that at the full council earlier this year, 2 years worth of funding was awarded for a single issue review of the plan around climate change. So post adoption, we'll commence work on that.
Okay, thank you. No more hands. So if I move on to a few other things, in the report it mentions the Transport Forum with a date to be advised. That is the 12th of January going forward. Obviously, during the second lockdown, our parking income took a hit. Sorry, Councillor Albert. But the figures from that are hopefully they are now starting to pick up. And the only other bit I've got to report on outside of what's in the report, there was a meeting last Friday about Hitchin Station, trying to move that forward with the access from the eastern side. There is, as Councillor Billing will know, a study to try and see if we can relocate aggregate industries who we need them to move so that the site can be fully utilised. And that has been agreed funding between a number of parties. So the study is fully funded, and we will see whether we can move them and try and move forward to get better access from what I call the eastern side, because you've already got Highover Farm, possible added on, and the college site added on. So you've got more people. So walking under the tunnel is not the best idea for them. So. Is there any other questions in general? Councillor Albert?
I didn't realise you'd taken over as chair, Councillor Clark. I'm impressed.
I'm just waking you up.
Thank you. Yes, I have got three questions. You'd be pleased to know. And none of it to do. What do you think of Tim Flowers? But I can ask you that another time. On 8.15 Luton Airport, it's not obviously mentioned directly in the report, but I do note from various stuff in the local paper recently, there was obviously some various beginnings of a consultation around sort of air traffic control routes, and I'm wondering whether, I don't know whether this sits with you or Councillor Jarvis as to whether and how the North Herts Council might wish to be involved and ultimately comment upon that when it comes to the more formal consultation next year. On 8.16, obviously very much welcome that Hitchin being chosen as one of those 3 feasibility studies, and certainly something if we can log down. I'm sure the Hitchin committee would like to have a discussion around that in the fullness of time, and we can kind of log that one down with you. And then finally, Paul, on 8.18, I like the idea of what's described as Trans 2 funding. Yes. I assume it is Trans 2 funding because it talks about longer term projects which must be completed by spring 2021, which I wouldn't regard a long-term project as spring 2021. Is that really the right date, or is the Herts County Council got a ridiculously short deadline again, or indeed government giving them a ridiculously short deadline again for completion of a so-called longer-term project?
Do you want to take those first, Paul, or?
Well, I think Steve can assist with the last one, because I think the dates, I think it's the commitment of the funds, but I think you've got 2 or 3 years to be able to deliver them. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes, I believe so. I was going to comment that I'm rather surprised that the council hasn't been told anything about this, since county councils were told a long time ago which schemes were going to be submitted. Yeah. And indeed, the county council has been told how much money they've got since then. Yeah. So it's somewhat disturbing that they've not had that back to the district.
We are one day early in that I have a briefing tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, in which case I will find out a bit more and get answers. The local plan has been taking up a lot of time and a lot of focus. And in tomorrow afternoon, I have the pleasure of an airspace discussion with Luton Airport. So again, I can't, necessarily comment immediately. We're going to get some more information tomorrow on those other bits.
Okay, Steve, you had your hand up separately. Was that for a separate point?
No, that was to cover that point that I was rather surprised.
Okay.
I mean, but my understanding, in fact, on the basis of the information I've been given, none of the North Hart schemes are on the list.
Yeah, that was the other place I wanted to go. That they seem to change the criteria for the schemes. When we were first submitting them, it was they had to be totally. They could be anything, but they seem to then say that they had to be apart from motorised traffic. They had to be separated, which made it a bit difficult, which is why I think our ones got knocked on the head.
Okay, Ian Falstone.
If I may assist Councillor Clark, on Councillor Albert's first question on 8.15, yeah, Luton Airport's quite confusing at the minute. There's probably 3 at least different pieces of work out there. There's the expansion to 19 million passengers per annum beyond the 18 million, which is their current planning condition, which we've responded to. With regard to the flight path changes, you are correct, Councillor Albert. This is a consultation that we are working with colleagues in the County Council. In fact, I have a meeting this Friday. This is the air traffic. What they're trying to do is separate the arrivals from Luton and Stansted. Currently, they kind of assess it as 2 motorways coming together at a single roundabout, and it causes congestion and delays in arrivals, so they're seeking to separate them out. Now, clearly, there'll be winners and losers of separating them out, and some of the arrival routes do impact on Letchworth and Baldock at this point in time, but we're kind of working a response up on that. With regard to the short deadline on the tranche 2, yes, very similar to the tranche 1, matter of weeks, if not a couple of months to get it installed. And yeah, if Councillor Jarvis knows more than we do, then at the minute we're still waiting to hear whether any of the projects we submitted for that are going to go ahead or not. So at the time of writing the report, we just didn't know. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Is that your hand and legacy hand, Steve, or do you want to come back again? Okay, so in the report, there we've also got the 2 neighbourhood plans. I think it's actually Barkway and Nuthampstead. We don't want to lose any of our villages, so I think technically that's what we have to agree to. So we've got 2 recommendations. I want to add a third, and I think the Cabinet ought to place on record its thanks to Nigel Smith and his colleagues for all the work that they put in over the inspections over the last 3 weeks. I think it's been a massive effort, and I think we should recognise that in terms. So I'm going to add that as a recommendation.
I'm delighted to second that recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So well, I think perhaps you move and I second to get it the right way around, Paul.
Yeah, okay, happy to.
So there's those 3 recommendations. Can I put those to you then? And could you vote in the normal way? Thank you very much. That is clearly carried. And I need now to go on to my, oh yes, it's the item 8 is the North Harts Community Lottery, and it's Councillor Hoskins to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman. It's the report you have in front of you. I mean, it's quite key perhaps to look at the background under 7.1 and 7.2. This is a project that's been mooted around for a few years, came to the previous administration in 2017, not pursued at the time because of the costs involved. Since that time, the commercial team have gone back to see if there's a way that it can be done more effectively. This is the result of that. And also, I think we asked them to look at the emphasis on this administration's ambition to get a better community return. And that's particularly relevant, I think, in the current climate where we're seeing certainly through the Hitchin Committee and through the Cabinet Panel on Community Engagement, that arts and culture groups are seriously strapped for money. So I think this is coming forward at probably the right time. Steve Crowley, the Service Director, is here to answer any questions on the detail, but the report is there in front of you. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything to add first, Steve, or?
Nothing to add. As Keith has explained, the report is as it is, and I think probably in the document it does set out the finances. I'm just trying to get to the exact page. On page 51, which is obviously what we are aiming to achieve, and if we were successful with that, it would generate some good income, which directly will impact locally to organisations and also the council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, Ruth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the principle of this lottery, because it says the background, why it wasn't pursued, but there's no explanation regarding the principle, because I remember when we first started talking about commercialisation ideas, there were some concerns raised that lotteries usually are, there is a lot of evidence that lotteries are played by people who can ill afford to do so, and that you're effectively taking money from the poorest people. Whilst I can see, you know, obviously there's lots of merit in raising money for charities and community projects that will benefit our local charities particularly, I just wondered what consideration had been given to that aspect of such a scheme. And the second thing I wanted to ask is, I noticed the breakdown of the tickets, 10p goes to the council, but 17 pence goes to the lottery management company, which is quite a substantial bit more. So I just wanted to ask what consideration's been given to those two things.
Okay, two questions there. Keith, do you want to pick those up?
Yeah, I can do. Well, I think this is the reason it's coming back to Cabinet now, in that we're bringing it back because we do believe that this is a way. I know I was one of the ones that was a little doubtful in the early days as well. But the reality is we need to find funds to help local groups from whatever source we can. And I think the amount of money that goes to the organiser, I think if that were balanced against what we felt presumably in 2017 was going to be the cost of the council running it, was considerably more. When those figures, I believe, were put out in 2017, there was little or nothing in it for the council because of the costs that would be incurred. But by getting a private organiser to do it, who I think Steve made the point in the report, who do run these things for other local authorities as well. Yeah, I think this is the way to go if you're going to go with a lottery. I can understand some people's reluctance on it, but I think the benefits of now that we are raising more money for the community in this proposal than I think we were in the past, I think that outweighs, the benefits outweigh the drawbacks.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Mantle.
Thank you. The council did actually run a lottery quite a few years ago now. Trouble is, I can still remember, and it faded away as not a great success. What do we think has changed that means that now such a lottery would be a success, whereas it wasn't when we tried it in the past?
I'll come back on that. Yeah, again, I think these things always launch with great effect. The one I've always used in the past is where you give away, for example, discounted car parking tickets. There's always a huge uptake in the first instance, and then it does tend to die off as people get used to it. So that's always a risk with this. But there's nothing in there that says, all right, we can trial it for a period of time. If we're finding it's not making the returns, or if it's taking too much time or whatever, then we'll just cease. It won't happen. But
Okay.
it's worth trying.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Billing, Judy.
Thank you. I'm not crazy about the idea of lotteries and never have been. And unlike some of my children, I've never been an avid rusher off to the shop every weekend to get my national lottery ticket. But I do suspect that the answer to Ian may be, I don't know how long ago it was the council ran a lottery. I have no memory of it, which is very, very, very unusual. But it may be that it was so long ago that it was before the days even of the national lottery, and the local the consciousness of the population that such things were even a thing. And so, despite my total lack of enthusiasm for such things as lotteries, I would suggest that we give it a try. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, and we can revisit it and be terribly flexible and imaginative.
Judy. Councillor Dennis Harbour, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Chair. I broadly agree with the sentiments looking at the split between what's going to go to good causes, etc., especially when we think about the way the arts sector has been completely decimated this year. One sort of note of caution when we look at the table under 8.13, we're factoring our eligible population as 16 plus. There's currently movement to increase the national lottery minimum age to 18 plus. Obviously, that's going to have a relatively small impact on the percentages that we're looking at, but I just want to make sure that that point's raised and we're conscious of increased age limits for this type of lottery in future.
That's a very interesting point. Do you want to come back on the age point, Keith?
No, I mean we're just basing it on what is at the moment, and not what may be, and we'll deal with what may be when it becomes what is.
Yeah, so we would respond if there was a change in age limit. We could obviously respond to that. Okay, Councillor Jarvis, Steve.
My position is probably rather similar to Judy's. I think I'm probably one of the few adults in this country that has never bought a national lottery ticket. Not many of us around these days. So my personal enthusiasm is not great. I mean, I think some of them will be bought by people who can afford them, but I suspect a proportion of that will be substitute buying from other lotteries. And I suspect, I can't remember who said it, I think it was Ian Mantle said that this may have a limited life. It may not be something that generates money forever, but my understanding is that the risks of doing it are pretty limited. We can give it a try, see what happens. I suspect it may generate some income while it's novel, then people will get bored with it, and the important decision we'll have to make then is to stop doing it at the right time as well as start doing it at the right time. But I think we should give it a try, see what happens.
Okay, thank you very much. I've not heard anyone actually speaking against this, so I think perhaps we can move to the vote. I know it comes under both Keith and Judy. It comes under your areas. So if Keith, you're proposing, Judy, do you want to second?
Gosh, yes.
Okay, so let's move to the vote then. That again is carried. So thank you very much. We then move on to IT capital, item 9, IT capital purchasing, and Ian Elbert to move.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, obviously it's slightly unusual sort of paper in advance of the budget meeting, but it did seem to me that it was appropriate and right to bring this to Cabinet now rather than wait until to February. The reports about the purchase of additional laptops and associated accessories is asking Cabinet to make the recommendation set out in and agree the recommendation set out in 2.1 and 2.2. Which probably just should mention that in 2.1 it mentions paragraph 7.2, where it should actually, there's a typo there, it should actually be 7.4, and later on it mentions 7.3 as detailed and that should be 7.5. So just to can amend that, Chair, for formally when we come to the decision point, that just for clarity. The report details budgetary proposals, as I say, that have been included in the budget papers due to go to full council in February, and these proposals were discussed at the recent budget workshops held in November. The reason for bringing this forward now ahead of the February meeting is twofold. Firstly, if early approval is granted, then the IT team can make an early start in this financial year with the procurement, build and distribution of laptops to staff. The recent staff survey highlighted that some staff are finding remote working more challenging because they either do not have NHDC equipment or have equipment that does not have the full functionality, such as the use of Zoom for online meetings. We've been in this remote way of working now for almost 9 months and are likely to continue to be for some time to come. So it's important that our staff are fully equipped, and indeed obviously members have got appropriate machinery as well. Which will have, and we do think this will have a positive impact on well-being, as well as ensure we can continue to serve our communities effectively. Now, additionally, a move to laptops will enable us to have a more agile approach with one core device that can be used both at home and in the office. This approach will increase our flexibility and resilience as well, and this is an important point, save us significant license costs from April 2021, as Microsoft will require us to have every device licensed, which means we would have to buy a significant number of additional licenses, which at today's prices are £395 each. So as I say, there are 3 key elements to the proposal that we are asking you to reprofile of the existing capital budget, totaling 331,000, with the majority being used to purchase laptops instead of desktops. We're going to bring 50,000 of that budget into this financial year so that the earlier issue of laptops to staff is made possible. And finally, that an additional capital item entry of additional 55,000 every 3rd year to top up the laptop refresh programme. This will be included in the standard budget process to be considered by the full council in February. However, it is included in this paper just for information as we think it's relevant to your considerations. So, Chair, I'm asking you to, and asking Cabinet to support the recommendations as set out with the amendments I mentioned earlier in 2.1 and 2.2. I move.
Thank you, Ian. As you've moved that, I will second it, and then Councillor Billing, Judy.
Thank you, Chair. This is not a new thought. Most of you who work with me all the time have probably sick of hearing me say this all the time, but it is the case that one of the unforeseen consequences of the hideous, horrible year that we've all lived through has been the ability to find new ways of engaging with the people we serve and the people we represent at officer level as well as at councillor level. And I, for one, hope that we don't lose those possibilities when we've all been vaccinated and move into some sort of new normal and forget all those people that we've engaged with through our computers who have never come to council meetings, who have never liked the idea of a public meeting or going out after dark or going out when it's the children's bedtime, but have chosen to engage with us through this strange new means that I hadn't even heard of last March. And if that means an adjustment in our budgets to make sure that people are fully equipped to be able to continue that work wherever necessary, through Zoom, through Teams, through whatever method we use, then I think it's really important that we make sure for our staff and for our councillors, but ultimately for the public, that we have these possibilities open to us.
Thank you, Judy. Any other contributions? If not, I think that's, if you're ready to vote. There are 2 amendments so that we say it's 7.4 for table 2 and 7.5 for table 3 so that we pass the right recommendations. I'm not going to read them out because you've got them in front of you. So are we ready to vote? Thank you very much. Okay, that is carried. So then we move then to item 10, which is the draft budget report. Councillor Elbert to move. I've been notified by Councillor Aspinwall that as the Fire Committee supported the report that's coming to Cabinet, she's got no, Kate has got nothing to add to that report. So, Ian.
Thanks, Chair. And obviously, this is the first stage of the budget process. That well, perhaps not the first stage. We've gone through some stages already, but the main purpose of the report at this stage is to highlight the base positions and provide feedback from the budget workshops which took place in November. Clearly, we'll be coming to full council in February 2021 with our final budget proposal. We are, as I think colleagues here will know, faced with a one-year settlement still, and not a medium-term financial strategy as we would much prefer. And there's been further delays on a new funding formula from government, although that may be a good thing. There's no commitment yet from government when they would look at the future funding for local government, which will have an impact on our medium-term financial strategy in future years. Now, the comments from the workshops were captured in the report in paragraphs 8.9, 8.10 and 8.11, and the resultant summary positions set out in table 3. The joint administration, and I think was pleased to see supported by our Conservative colleagues, rejected at this stage the savings on litter bins, toilets and Christmas trees, an eclectic mix of things. It's right to say I think more work can be done on whether we have the right number of bins in the right places and the right size, and I think that work should be done first of all. I think for residents and businesses, public toilets in our town centres are vital. It seems unlikely that anyone will come forward to take on the responsibility of running the toilets that we currently operate. We don't rule this out, but we would not wish to see any toilets being permanently closed just to save some extra money. And indeed, on Christmas trees, I think the trees provided in our town centres and at Garden House, I think are a vital part of our contribution to the community, and a part, obviously, the taxpayers' contribution towards the community. And I was delighted to be part of the Lights of Life event this year at Garden House, which raised over £46,000 for the hospice, a fantastic thing. And our North Herts Council donated tree was the central feature of that event. Now, owing to the changes made in relation to updating inflation amounts, particularly regarding pay, the savings numbers, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, decreased from around 2.65 million in the medium-term financial strategy to 2.1 million. There'll still be clearly a need to identify savings in future years through the work of the Challenge Board set up under this joint administration. And of course, we'll want to consult with residents over these difficult choices that there will be during the summer and autumn to help inform our next budget setting for 22-23. The income guarantee from COVID support is to be continued by government in the period from April to June next year, which is welcome. It's right to highlight the change, as I mentioned just now, about pay inflation and the link to the spending review, where Chancellor said public sector pay inflation would be 0%, a real thank and a kick in the teeth for hard-working frontline workers across many local government and other parts of the public sector. Referencing doesn't control local government pay inflation, and that is subject to pay negotiations. But indeed, that could mean that pay inflation in 21-22 could be lower than the revised 2.25%. But I would certainly here put out a message that what the government there is doing on public public sector pay is just plain wrong. And I hope this council and many other councils will send a clear message that we want that those our frontline workers should not be treated in this appalling way. Now, the continuation of new homes bonus looks likely for another year, but there's a continued uncertainty over what will or won't happen post 21-22. It might be a further series of one-year funding announcements. And we've also now, and Mr. Cooper's carried out a further review, working with Joe Duffus's team of the council tax base, and this has shown a further decrease due to the higher levels of council tax reduction scheme claimants. Clearly, we hope that will help to hopefully begin to reduce in the coming year. But based on estimates, the impact next year would be a reduction in funding of around 100,000. And this will be updated in the next version of the budget. So, Chair, what we're asking the Cabinet to do this evening is to support the recommendations that are set out in 2.1, which notes the funding forecasts for 21-22 and beyond. Note the comments made at the budget workshops, and particularly in terms of the both capital and revenue, and that we'll also confirm that the council tax increase for 21-22 we're proposing will be in line with the medium-term financial strategy, i.e. the maximum amount allowed without the need for a local referendum, likely to be 2%, but obviously that, or £5, but we're waiting to hear confirmation of that later in the year and early next year. So, Chair, I would move this paper for us. Clearly, we'll be coming back to Cabinet and to full council in the new year with our firmed up proposals, but I move this progress report for now, Chair, and the recommendations 2.1 to 2.4.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'll second that from the Chair. So it's open for discussion. Clearly, we've had quite considerable discussion in the workshops, all-party workshops, so I'm not surprised not to see too many hands. It's a very clear report. So thank you to yourself, Ian, and thank you to Ian Cooper and his staff for the work for this. So are we ready to vote then on that? Thank you very much. So if we move to the vote. Yes, I voted now. That is clearly carried. Thank you very much. So I'm afraid it's still you, Ian. So the next item is the second quarter revenue monitoring. And again, there is nothing that the chair of the Fire Committee wants to add on that item. So over to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks. And again, obviously, this is really just giving Cabinet an update of the second quarter revenue monitoring. There's 3 recommendations in front of you, and it's under 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3 of the report. Table 3, in paragraph 8.1 continues to mainly reflect those variances that we are more certain about, with forward estimates detailed in the text and then summarised in table 5. The release of the COVID-19 grant in table 6 in 8.17 is adjusted to reflect the estimated overall impact. Now, paragraph 8.8 to 8.12 refer to estimated levels of funding from council tax and business rates, although noting that the impact of any shortfall impacts in later years. The spending review provided more detail, as I mentioned earlier, that the government will provide in relation to collection fund shortfalls. This will be reflected in the next version of the budget report, and also the quarter 3 and end of year budget monitoring reports. The council was predicting, even taking into account the money provided from central government, a net impact on our budget of 1.5 million, but potentially up to 2 million. Those figures were an estimate. As Councillor Clark mentioned earlier on, the first lockdown, car parking income increased to approximately 10 to 20% of the normal income levels. The second lockdown saw the car parking income decrease to around 30 to 40%. Less, but nevertheless, obviously an impact on our income. Table 6 within the report highlighted the impact on the council's general fund based on the forecast carried out at the start of the year. The council was forecasting a balance of approximately 9.4 million. However, by the end of the year, it was likely to be 7.6 million on current forecasts. So, Chair, I think obviously I'm happy to answer any specific questions in relation to the report, but I'm asking Cabinet this evening to approve the changes to the general fund budget as identified in Table 3 and paragraph 8.2. That's a 2.036 million increase in net expenditure. And we're also asking Cabinet to note the changes to the general fund budget for 21-22 as identified in Table 3 and paragraph 8.2, which is a total of 53k decrease in net expenditure. And these will be incorporated in the draft revenue budget for 21-22. So we'll move those 3 recommendations, Chair, but obviously happy to pick up any questions, or indeed Mr. Cooper is available to pick up any specifically detailed questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. That's a very detailed report. So again, thanks to yourself and to Mr. Cooper. I'll second the recommendations. Open for any questions or discussion. If not, again, and we're moving so quickly that it takes a little while for people to take the vote down, and I just asked for the vote to be taken down, and it was taken down even before I'd asked. So if we're ready to vote, please indicate. Thank you very much. That is carried. And we're now on to item 12, the investment strategy. And again, over to you, Ian. And again, there's no additional comments from the chair of the Fire Committee.
So, as we're required to bring to Cabinet at mid-year and an end-of-year position of Treasury Management, Table 2 highlights the capital spend that has been reprogrammed, including the amounts in relation to property investment due to the current economic conditions. That the adjustments to the capital programme for 2021 onwards as a result of the revised timetable of schemes detailed in Table 2, increasing the estimated spend in 21-22 by just 7.022 million be approved. It's probably worthwhile referencing here, and I know it's been discussed elsewhere, the changes to the Public Works Loan Board requirements. This really is the go-to place for council to borrow due to the ease of access and competitive rates. As part of the spending review, the borrowing rates have been decreased back down to the level that they were before were artificially increased some months ago now. However, this has been accompanied by restrictions on borrowing, meaning if there is anything in the capital programme that is investment primarily for yield, for income, then use of the Public Works Loans Board is not allowed. So we would certainly need to make sure that if where we are looking to make use in the future of the Public Works Loan Board, that whole issue of community benefit is very much built in to any of the programmes that we look at. And we will need to review our capital programme to ensure it is compliant and also make sure we fully consider the justification for capital projects in future. It's worth highlighting here to colleagues the decline in interest rates and the new investments as our old ones finish, providing a maximum yield of around 0.1%. And point you to Table 2 in the report, which obviously gives you some further detail around that. we have done and we are doing a review. Councillor North and I met with our sort of investment advisor with Mr. Cooper, and looking to see what areas that we can see how we can maximise our investment opportunities, and we'll be making some proposals in relation to that as part of the new investment strategy. But clearly, obviously the amount of investment income at the moment is really under some strain. The council is dealing with a high number of grants and schemes at the moment, as we know, on particularly around business grants, and this was why the council's cash balances have been quite high. Indeed, that announcement, you know, that we will obviously, as I mentioned just now, we'll all need to have a look at all of these things in relation to any implications that there are for our investment strategy, which will come to full council in February. So this evening, colleagues, I'm asking council to agree the 4 recommendations in the report, that we note the forecast of 3.937 million in 2021 on the capital programme as per paragraph 8.3, that the Cabinet approves the adjustments to the capital programme, as I mentioned earlier, for 2021 onwards as a result of the revised timetable of schemes detailed in Table 2, which obviously increases the estimated spend in the next financial year by 7.022 million. That the Cabinet notes the availability of capital resources and detailed in Table 3, paragraph 8.6, and the requirement to keep the capital programme under review for affordability, which we are doing on a regular basis. And finally, that we recommend to council that it notes the position of Treasury management activity as at the end of September 2020 as part of the mid-year review. So, Chair, I recommend those 4 recommendations to Cabinet and obviously onwards to full council.
Thank you very much, Ian. And again, I will second that proposal. Any questions or discussion? I mean, looking at those interest rates, it does make you wonder whether it's worth putting it in at all. But there we obviously have to do our best on that, and there's an awful lot of work goes into getting those very small returns. Okay, if I see no hands up, so are you ready to vote? Thank you very much. I think everyone has voted, so that is carried. We then, I think we've now got, just looking at the time, we're now at the point where we need to look at the resolution to go into part 2. So if I think I've got to the right place. So I'm going to, and I'm also conscious of the time, so I'm going to suggest that I'll move the recommendation and then suggest that we take a 5-minute break before we start, and do move into to part 2 to the room, as Hilary will guide you. But first of all, we need to pass the resolution. So I am moving that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following report will involve the likely disclosure exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act as amended. And I ought to know that off by heart now, didn't I?
Yeah,
so I'm moving that.
Seconded.
Thank you, Paul. Could you move to the vote on that? That is carried. So I'll then invite Hilary to take us through into the appropriate place for that. Right. Welcome back, everyone. And to those watching streaming or on the recording of this, we have now back into part one, into the public session. And I will now ask Hilary to undertake a roll call to make sure that everyone is present who should be present.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call your names if you can just respond to me, please. Councillor Ian Albert.
Yep.
Judy Billing.
Yep.
Paul Clark.
Present.
Elizabeth Dennis Harburg.
Here.
Keith Hoskins.
Yep.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Martin Steers Hanscom.
Yes.
Ruth Brown.
Present.
Ian Mantle.
Yes.
Carol Stanier.
Yes.
Then we have Anthony Roche.
Yep.
Ian Fullstone.
Present.
Ian Cooper.
Yes.
Jeanette Thompson.
Present.
I'm not sure if Joe Duffy is still here.
Yep, still here.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Steve Crowley.
Yes. Present.
Vaughan Watson.
Present.
Louise Randall.
She's gone.
Oh, she's gone, is she? Sorry. Chloe Gray.
Also gone.
Okay, thank you. Peter Lapham.
Yes, here.
William is on doing the IT. We also have, is Mr. Eddleston still here?
Yes, returned.
Hello. And we have visitor Claire Strong.
I'm listening.
Thank you. That's everybody. Thank you.
Okay, we now go to item 14, which is the item 13, land at the Snipe Western, and that's Keith Hoskins to introduce the item.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's as the report, just reiterating that it's it was declared surplus to requirements in 2016, so we're just doing that really again now.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'll move the recommendation.
And I will second that. The report is in front of you. Are we ready to vote? Thank you very much. Those recommendations are carried. Thank you. We then move to item 14, which is the one I wrongly said earlier, which is the COVID-19 leisure contracts recovery. And Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. So this is because this is the changes to the updating of the leisure recovery arrangements were approved at council in September, consequent upon the lockdown that took place in November and in December, when the local facilities were closed, and there was therefore an absence of any income during that time, which means that additional support needs to be provided. The recommendation, as printed on the order paper, says to approve the recommendation in part 2, bearing in mind the issues we had about the printed recommendations in part 2. I'd like to take some advice from the officers as to whether or not that's actually the right recommendation for this part of the report. Will you help me on that, please?
Right. Is that Vaughan or Ian Cooper?
Someone who knows whether or not this should be in what should be in part 1.
I'm
sorry, I just couldn't get off mute. Sorry about that. Yes, so yes, in terms of the part 1 report, I think what we need to do is refer back to the decisions of part 2. Ian Cooper, could you just confirm whether or not that
we're not going to make, we're just going to say what the paperwork you have, Vaughan and members. So recommendation to approve the recommendation in part 2 because it's still confidential at this stage.
Okay.
Sorry to interject there.
That's the point I wanted clarified.
Well done, Steve.
So
yes.
I will move the recommendation as set out on the paper.
Okay, thank you. And obviously this is a recommendation to council that will be taken in confidential section in part 2. So Can we move to the vote on that if there's no discussion? Oh, sorry, I'll second that. Thank you very much. So then we move to the final item of the evening, which is item 16. Keith, that's Charnwood House. Keith, to report and move a recommendation.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Yes, after a good deal of discussion, we've obviously committed to community use for this building. That's now set in stone. So the recommendation, just to bear in mind as well, we're advised that expenditure of this sort would have to go past full council as well, so that's worth noting. But the recommendation is 2.1 with an additional sentence that we've added on, which could I please ask Hilary to read out the final sentence to make sure I've got it right then.
Yes, so it is 2.1 as printed, plus the addition of with the widest possible community engagement on the proposals and use.
Okay, so that is the recommendation as stated, and I'm very happy to move that.
And I'd be very happy to second that, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. So that's moved and seconded. I think, I think we should say that we were very pleased that with the presentation that was made earlier in the meeting. We clearly want to move forward to consider that. One of the thoughts that we had in mind, of course, given the situation and reflecting on the presentation, that things are very uncertain at the moment in terms of the way in which community groups will be able to make use of the building. Therefore, further discussions and work with CCMA and looking at the wider community and involving them to get the maximum possible community use in the building is something that we can do together with council working with the community. So that's something we're very positive going forward, but we wanted to make that clear, but also that there's no rush to make a final decision, but we want to continue the discussions. So I think that's, hopefully that reflects some of our discussions. Okay, so if there's I see no other hands, so if we're ready to vote, can I put that to you all? And that is, I think, carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. And at 11 minutes past 10, later than we are sometimes, but a very important and full meeting. So thank you, everyone. For those I don't see between now and the festive season, happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, compliments of the season, however you wish to celebrate it. And do take a rest, those of you that have been working very hard, particularly thinking of our staff, who, as we said earlier today, have been absolutely fantastic. And we want to say thank you to our staff as well from this public meeting, as well as we did earlier today when we had a staff briefing. So thanks, everyone, and good night.